We're back. Let's see if we remember how to do this after a little bit of an absence. Now, this is not the first time Jamie and I have seen each other since the last time we did a pod. Jamie and I actually saw each other in person because the reason for the absence, I got married and went on a honeymoon, so I was a little busy. I had some personal things to attend to, but we are back, the NY Sports Index, and boy, has a lot happened since the last time we were here. The Jets still have not won a football game, though. The Giants finding new ways to lose. The Yankees are out of the postseason. The Islanders are already firing coaches 6 games into the season. We'll try to get to it all here on the latest edition of the Index. Jamie, how are you, my friend? It was good to see you in person.
Yes, it was good to see you in person again. We used to see each other 6 days a week. And then obviously post-pandemic, I've moved, all that other stuff. But lots happened since we've been gone. Don't worry, we're not going to recap the last 2 to 3 weeks worth of content. By the way, we wanted to come back on Monday, by the way, but AWS had some different ideas. And I'm sure anybody that works in the tech space of any kind or just wanted to access, like, I don't know, a third of the internet, you probably understand where we're coming from. But look, I'm excited to be back. There's a lot of interesting things to talk about. The Jets gave us some, and particularly Woody Johnson gave us some big headlines this week. The Giants came off of an epic collapse, but there's still things to be excited about. It's this time of year. It's October. It's great. We have the World Series coming up. Sadly, neither one of our teams are in it, but this is the time of year. I said on previous shows, best time of year. NBA came back last night. NHL is off and running. The World Series is about to start. We're in the middle of college and the NFL season. I mean, this is in North America. This is the time to be a sports fan. It's this period. And excited to get into it. And I guess, Chris, you tell me, do you want to talk about your winless Jets first? Because your owner made some comments that were, is inflammatory the right way? I mean, they are. I think I'll just say it the way that I said it in the show sheet. He cut Justin Fields' nuts off publicly in a media scrum. Didn't get caught on a hot mic, didn't get caught lip reading, just in the middle of a good old-fashioned media scrum at the owners' meetings and the fall owners' meetings, just castrated him right there.
So we're starting with the Jets, obviously.
Yeah.
Clearly, is my takeaway there.
Yeah. I mean, what did you think about these guys? Because here's the thing. There's a fine line here because Justin Fields has been bad, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, plenty in this segment. But the owner of the team so publicly saying what he did about Justin Fields, even if it was in the realm of trying to defend Aaron Glenn, you don't see that very often. Maybe outside of Jerry Jones, because he's always the wild card, but you don't see that very often. And I don't know, caught me by surprise, Chris.
I think putting the words specifically to the side for just a second, Woody Johnson's actions at the owners' meetings is kind of the quintessential example of why the Jets find themselves in these messes pretty regularly, right? Things rot from the top. And Woody has, ever since he's owned the team, and he's owned the team since I've been alive, he kind of always does this. He kind of always handles these things incorrectly, right? It was after firing Saleh, going on the Ambassador Johnson press conference, phone interview that he did with everybody, and just didn't really handle himself that well and made it seem like he knew what he was doing, had all these years of experience, and just didn't come off like somebody who actually understood what it took to run a football team in the year, at the time, 2024. And here he is again showing that he just doesn't know what he's doing. And it's kind of the reason why the Jets find themselves in a mess where they're 0-7. There's trade rumors flying all over the place. There's rumors of Aaron Glenn potentially being one and done. There's all these question marks about where the Jets go from here. And yeah, it was just an answer to a question that a media member asked him. But the way it was handled, the way it's now forced Aaron Glenn to respond to it the next day is just further proof that the Jets can't get out of their own way. You want to defend Aaron Glenn? You can say, listen, we hired Aaron Glenn to fix this mess. We knew it was going to take more than one season. I still believe in Aaron. I still believe in what he's doing. The defense has played great the last couple of weeks. Special teams has turned a corner. We're going to get the offense on track. I believe in Aaron Glenn. Is it that hard? You don't have to throw Justin Fields under the bus to give the support that you want to give to Aaron Glenn, who you gave a 5-year contract to, and you gave a lot of money to. If you want to support him, I get that. It's 7 games into the season. You don't want to throw him under the bus, but you don't have to cut off your nose to spite your face. And now it puts Aaron Glenn in an awkward spot because now I think Tyrod Taylor is going to be the starting quarterback. But if even for a brief moment Aaron Glenn was considering going back to Justin Fields, how do you do it now? So as a coach, you're handcuffed. You actually don't have the decision-making power that you did because of what your owner did. Because if you start Justin Fields, all sorts of questions now come from that. And it's a mess. And the team is a mess enough on the field. They don't need to be a mess off the field. And now they're stumbling into being a mess off the field.
Yeah, and Tyrod Taylor also has an injury. He's day-to-day
Day-to-day with a knee.
That kind of popped up here on Wednesday in addition. So you just have all of these question marks surrounding a team that just doesn't need to have this many question marks around it. They've got plenty of just on-the-field issues to solve. Look, this organization, and you see it a lot in sports, typically when you have an organization that has been as bad or as maligned or as made fun of as much as the Jets have been over the last few decades, usually you have to point to the very tippy top of the organization to kind of see why that's happening. And the reverse is true as well. Look, you can't say this. Like, you have to know as not even just as a football owner. And, a lot of times, and you'll hear it on the show a lot, and I know, Chris, you've heard it from me a bunch. Sometimes you have to just look at these things like life or like a business. You are the executive. You are the CEO, essentially, of the New York Jets. You're the president, CEO, you're the owner. You cannot talk about key employees like this publicly. Behind the scenes, totally different story. Your meetings with Mogi or your meetings with Glenn, sure, you could talk about openly and like this. But to do this publicly is ridiculous. It is also, not only is it bad for Justin Fields, it's bad for the team. It's also bad for other players that might consider wanting to sign with the Jets down the road, knowing that, hey, if I'm bad, is my owner going to come out and talk about how I'm shitty? Like, it's just a complete and utter mess of a franchise, an utter mess of an organization. From top to bottom, we could talk about what they needed to do to going all the way back to, even if we're just going to put it in this year's window, go all the way back to their decision of who they hired to run their coaching process, to what they did this year, to what this team is going to be doing in the future. Like, there is really nothing that I like about what this organization is doing, both in the short term and in the long term. And that would really concern me as a Jets fan, that like there isn't that thing to hold hope out. There isn't that nugget of information that you really, really like, you know what, there's this piece or there's this player or there's this situation, and then you're really, really excited about it. So for me, on my end, this is just emblematic of the overall dysfunction of the Jets organization and the overall problems that this team is going to have to deal with now and in the future.
I also think that when you're the owner of the team and you basically say that our quarterback sucks, and that was your big move in the offseason to try to solve the position, or at least you thought could be a potential solution at the position, what are you then saying about your GM and your head coach? That's the other problem that I have with this, is that you think you're doing this as a service to defend your coach and your GM and what they're doing, but in fact, you're kind of making them look like fools, because you're saying it only took me 7 games to realize the $30 million that we gave to Justin Fields was a big waste of my money. And it just, I don't know, it creates I said this before, the Jets are already a circus. They don't need help. And this is helping them become more of a circus. The product on the field does enough. We could sit here and talk about what happened on Sunday against the Panthers, and there's enough there to discuss how they're a mess, and you don't know where they're going. You don't need this to be the cherry on top of the sundae, and yet Woody Johnson just invited it. And again, there's a way to defend your coach and show support towards him while not doing this, because I hate to be the bearer of bad news, Jamie, but Tyrod Taylor is not the epitome of health in his career. As as evident of this week, he's dealing with a knee injury. So we may see Justin Fields as early as this Sunday. And so now the owner has given clearance to all the fans to be against this guy if he goes back into the game. The owner wants you to boo this guy. The owner wants you to be done with this guy because he's done with him. And so it's just a really bad look. It's a bad optic, and I don't think it does what Woody Johnson thought it was going to do. It actually makes it worse, and yet the Jets still sit here at 0-7. They're not naming their starter for Sunday's game against the Bengals, and they're staring 0-8 and the number 1 overall pick dead in the face.
Yeah, and like I said, at the very beginning here, you want to defend Aaron Glenn, that's fine.
He does. He gives him hugs all the time. Gives him a hug every time he sees him.
I'm sure. I'm sure he just Big hugger guy, a big Bailey fan from the NXT era. But to me, it's, you can defend him all you want, and that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with him coming out and trying to defend Aaron Glenn, but to defend Aaron Glenn in the way that he did not only undermines Aaron Glenn, not only undermines the GM, like you said, but causes just a litany of issues, not only in the locker room with current players, but potentially with future players. And you start to think back about how this organization has treated players in general over the last several years, and even coaches. You could talk about how, the Robert Saleh firing went down and all things of that nature. And you start to wonder, like, again, and we talked about this, and I've talked about this with a lot of people, there's only 32 of these jobs. I get it. And by the way, the 32 of the jobs applies to the GM, applies to the coach, applies to the starting quarterback. There are only 32 of each of those jobs in the National Football League. So you're always going to find somebody to fill those holes, but you're going to find the right people at the right time to fill those holes. It gets increasingly difficult when the head honcho continues to do things like this. And this is not the first mistake. This is not the first time he's come out and publicly criticized people. It's just, it doesn't work. By the way, it doesn't work for Jerry Jones either. Like, I know he's the poster boy for this. When's the last time that organization has been considered a pinnacle organization? They might be worth the most in the NFL, but they don't win the most.
Yeah, where's their
success? They don't have the most
right
respect.
Now? Yeah,
it's
bad. It sets you up for more problems than it does the benefits of what you actually think it's going to do. And I mean, let's face it, right now, the on-the-field product is certainly not worth talking about. And trade rumors and who can go and full-blown fire sale is really the tenor of conversations around the New York Jets. And we'll see where that ultimately goes. Like, I don't even want to, we'll do it on Friday's show because that's what we do, but I don't even want to preview the game against the Bengals because it just feels so insignificant right now. I mean, I think for Aaron Glenn, he needs to show something and this team needs to start winning games, or being one and done becomes a real legitimate possibility. But right now the focus is on whether or not this team's going to go full-blown fire sale, and if they're going to trade players like Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald and Quincy Williams or Quinnen Williams and Breece Hall, and who may be going between now and November 4th in the trade deadline. That to me is the biggest story surrounding this New York Jets team right now. And it's one that I've told you offline that I'm extremely conflicted about what I think they should do.
They're also going to be an interesting spot, too. If, let's say, they do end up with the number 1 overall pick and they are locked in on a quarterback, there's going to be a question about whether or not this regime should be the regime to make that pick. We know the tendency that NFL teams tend to like in recent years, which is pairing a young quarterback with a young offensive-minded head coach. What kind of record would it take to get the number 1 pick? Because the Jets are bad, but there are some other really bad football teams. Like the Tennessee Titans might be the worst team in football. They might be worse than the Jets if you watch them play. I know they have a win, but
they have a win.
They do. But there are some bad teams that they're going to be competing with the Jets for that number 1 overall pick. Now, again, like the Titans aren't going to be taking a quarterback, but you never know with the trades and things of that nature. But they just have a lot of questions they're going to have to answer, and they're going to have to figure out who their core pieces are outside of Sauce and Garrett Wilson, because like you paid those guys recently, and you're going to keep those guys around, but who else are your core pieces? Who else is left? Obviously, you have your young tackles as well, but they're going to have, and again, I don't know if I trust the people in charge to make these decisions, but you're going to have an entire organizational audit if you end up with, in general, but particularly if you end up with the number 1 pick, and you're going to try to insert a young quarterback into this offense. And, I've watched a few of the quarterbacks in this class so far, and there's some pieces that you like. I don't like any of these guys to the level I like the Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, not even quite like a Cam Ward, but there are guys like Fernando Mendoza, Ty Simpson. I haven't had a chance to watch Dante Moore yet. I'm going to watch him probably later this week as well. There are guys that I like in this class, and guys that'll probably get picked in the top 3 for QB needy teams, but I just don't know if we're just going to start the cycle again. And this is a situation where you let Aaron Glenn and this group pick their quarterback, and then a year from now, new head coach, new play caller, new GM, and you're just, everything is off cycle once again. And, we've seen a team that I'm very close to geographically right here make those mistakes. And it looks like they're finally, after all these years, starting to come around a little bit to it. The Bears are playing good football right now, but they've had to do a lot of things to make up for the fact that over the last, like you said, 2 different regimes, they haven't been able to match quarterback, coach, GM properly. And it has caused them to kind of continue to sputter. And now it finally looks like they're starting to come out of it. But it took a number 1 overall pick. It took a top head coaching candidate. And it took, quite frankly, some luck in general to get back to this point now where it looks like they might be on the right track. I fear the Jets are going to continue down the path the Bears did, where maybe they get there eventually, but they're going to set themselves back 2, 3, 4, 5 more seasons until they get the entire structure, Jenga properly.
When you use the term organizational audit at the end of the year, but there's also an organizational audit that's coming up on November 4th, because this regime is going to make decisions on whether or not they want Will McDonald here and Jermaine Johnson and Breece Hall and all these pieces that have been rumored to potentially be on the move between now and the NFL trade deadline. And I mentioned at the top of this topic that I'm conflicted about what I want them to do, because we're 7 games in, and yes, there's 10 games left in the season, and whether or not these guys get another crack at this, and to your point, if they get the number 1 pick, they deserve the opportunity to make that selection, is up in the air, and we'll use the last 10 games to evaluate that. Unfortunately, you kind of have to make the decision right now, because if you're going to allow Darren Muji the opportunity to trade all these guys to get draft capital, then you're saying that you're going to let him get a full offseason with those draft picks to build out a new team. You're not going to let Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn trade Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald and then at the end of the season fire those guys if the results aren't there. If you're willing to let them go full-blown fire sale, it's basically an endorsement of they're coming back next season. And we can debate the pros and cons of whether or not that's the right decision. But unfortunately, I think you have to make the determination right now of what you want to do with these 2 guys going into next year, because you're going to give them a very major choice to make here in the next 2 weeks to get some draft capital and then ultimately potentially have the number 1 overall pick. And right now, through 7 games, Jamie, I don't know if I trust these 2. They haven't certainly they haven't done anything to earn my trust over. I just don't know if I'm completely out on them because it's only 7 games, but it's not great so far. And so that's where the conflict is. I'm aware that it may be better off to get these draft picks, but I think if you do that, you're saying these guys get a year 2, and I'm not sure I'm ready to say that right now.
I'm with you, Chris. I'm looking at this team right now. I'm looking at their multi-year picture here. I'm not sure I'm trading anybody with term. And I'm not. Look, if somebody blows you away, you always listen. You know what I mean? You never know.
Always answer the phone call.
Yes, so you never know. Sometimes somebody gets really excited. But you've got what, a 1-1 on Will McDonald. You got 1 more year on Jermaine Johnson. Quinton Williams got 2 more years on his deal. Like, those are the guys I think you need to keep around and see and give yourself a shot to be competitive, because look, I understand the division is kind of in this weird spot where we just always assume the Bills are just going to be great, but the Bills have some cracks in their armor as well. I don't think the Bills' 5-year window is looking as promising as it did maybe 2 or 3 years ago. That's not to say they're not the division favorites or they shouldn't be. The Patriots look pretty good right now, but they have some roster holes they have to deal with. The Miami Dolphins are maybe the only dumpster fire that's bigger than the Jets' dumpster fire at the moment. It's because instead, right now, it's not Stephen Ross that's coming out and saying things. It's Mike McDaniel that can't keep his mouth shut and says stupid things at his press conference. And their quarterback that can't keep his mouth shut either. But to me, is I'm looking at the cornerstones of this roster, and the fact is you don't have a lot on your team next year. Like, there's a good chance that none of the 3 quarterbacks that are on your roster right now are on there next year. I mean, Cook might be because, whatever, but that's not a key piece. The only 2 running backs under contract next year are Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen. The only 2 wide receivers under contract next year are Garrett Wilson and Arian Smith. Mason Taylor's your only tight end on the roster. Vera Tucker, Simpson, Myers, Mitchell, Chooks Okafor, they're all free agents. Cisco, free agent. Clemens, free agent. Like, you start to look at some of these players and you go...
You said you were looking at talent, and then you shouldn't mention Michael Clemens.
But he's playing for you. Whether he should or not is a different story, but he is.
I watch him every week. Yeah, he's out there.
There's a point where it's just like, you don't have many guys on this roster right now for next year. And I'm not even talking about guys. I'm just talking about actual human beings with a pulse.
Yeah, the 3 players that I would be okay with moving, Breece, because I don't think they're re-signing him. They don't use him properly, and I don't think he's their guy.
Anybody that doesn't have term can go.
Right. Quincy Williams is a free agent at the end of the year. Also is fine.
Doesn't have terms.
And Michael Carter has term, but I don't think he's their guy, and I think he's going to be a cap casualty in the offseason anyway.
Yeah, so he's going to be.
if it's that type of player, then I'm okay with this general manager doing it because I think another general manager would do the same thing. It's the players like Will McDonald. It's the players like Jermaine Johnson, where I think there's a different coach and a different GM that can say, no, these are building blocks. Like, these are players I want on my team. And that, to me, I wouldn't give those types of options to this regime just yet.
The other thing, too, is you have to, if you're going to go, and let's be honest, if your idea is we're going to go into a complete, we're blowing the whole thing up.
Which,
you don't pay Sauce and Wilson. And I understand that your expectations when you sign those contracts and the 2 or 3 or 4 months, whatever it's been since those contracts got announced, it's a very different mindset around that team. But there is a point where if you can't strip all the way down and still pay those guys full market value, because then what are you paying a wide receiver in a corner on a last place team? So to me, that's why you keep the McDonald's. That's why you keep Jermaine Johnson. You give yourself another year to see where you sit, because you know why? Because you never know. You're probably not. But what if you have that Texans from a couple years ago season? What if you have the Commanders from last year's season? I'm not even talking about getting to like the AFC Championship game, like the Commanders got to the NFC Championship game. But you strike that rookie quarterback, you get that right combination, and there's a little bit of hope. You're not going to have that opportunity if you trade away all the talent. You're going to be completely starting from scratch. And by the way, you're going to try to insert a rookie quarterback on a team with no weapons? Like, you have some pieces. You have 2 tackles that I think you feel really good about, right? You have your wide receiver 1 that you feel really good about. You have your top cornerback that you feel really good about. You still have one of the best defensive linemen in the National Football League that you feel good about. If you keep a couple more of your key pieces there, like the McDonald, like Jermaine Johnson, all of a sudden you're maybe a good draft and a good offseason away from being at least competitive for a 7 seed, right? Versus if you move those guys completely out, you're either hamstringing a young quarterback you want to bring in, or you've just wasted all the money you just spent on re-signing those young guys, because by the time you come back around, those contracts are going to need to be redone. So you just paid those guys to sit around and go 3-14.
It is a mess, and unfortunately, they're going to have to make some decisions here in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully they turn it around, and hopefully the team starts playing better so that we don't even have to have the conversation about one and done across the board, because I'm certainly not rooting for that. I'm certainly rooting for these last 10 games to go well and Aaron Glenn to show that he's turned it around, because he's got 10 games to do that. It's certainly possible, right? There's certainly talent on this team to be able to do it. It feels like it's a really dire time for the Jets, and they have to really make these decisions well. They have to make the right decision, and so often they've gotten this wrong that it is at least worrisome. No surprise that we went 23 minutes on the New York Jets to open the show. The New York Giants, we'll talk about the football team here. Which of the 3 bullet points on our show rundown do you want to talk about first? Because I have strong opinions about 2 of them. 2 of them I got super strong opinions.
Okay. Which one do you have the least strong opinion of?
The second one, the middle choice.
Oh, okay. So then let's get that one out of the way. I assume to get the kicker talk.
It is the kicker conversation that I don't really have.
I just think we can bring it up just because, Jude missed a couple extra points in that game.
Really? I didn't realize that he missed a couple extra points in that game on Sunday. Not aware of that.
As much as it's so fun and so easy to blame the kicker, you gave up 33 points in the fourth quarter.
Well, that's fine, but if you just make the kick, both kicks, you win the football game. Like, it's really not that.
Get a stop, you win the... Yeah, because to be fair, it does set the Giants on a weird path, because you miss the extra point, then you try to go for 2 later and you don't get it. Then you miss the extra point again late. So there is a cascading effect to it. Young Waku is going to kick for them. 2 or 3 years ago, I would have been really excited about that. But the last couple of years, it's been real rough for Koo. But
why is this Brian Daboll's blind spot? Like, why is the kicking game his blind spot? Right, since he's gotten there, they've had this problem.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, this is a fascinating thing for me. Is given just the margins at the NFL level, it is shocking to me that teams don't spend more time scouting and looking for and creating backup plans for kickers. Like, it really surprises me, because if this was the starting left guard, they would spend 50 hours a week in their office figuring out the situation. But because it's a kicker, they just kind of hope you figure it out and just throw you out there. Like, it's a fascinating blind spot to me that I wish teams would Some teams luck into just a great kicker. Like, oh, cool, we can throw Brandon Aubrey out there from 78 yards and he'll be fine. But there are, prior to his issues, Justin Tucker, but those guys are few and far between. More often than not, you're going to have to be active with your kicking situation. You're going to have to be attentive to it. And it just feels like teams are just reactionary and recycle the same guys over and over again with no other thought. But
it's also just so interesting to me that this happening to you one time, I think is somewhat excusable. Like, you don't anticipate it when you show up to the field on Sunday. Like, this has kind of become a staple of Brian Daboll's Giants teams, where one time throughout the year they just have a kicking problem, and it feels like then
this is true so far this year. They had the one where Gano gets hurt in the middle of the game, and they can't,
which happened last year, right?
Yes,
he got hurt in warm-ups, and they didn't have a kicker.
Yep.
It's like, come on, let's get with the times here.
Why they don't cross-train punters is beyond me. I know it's easier. It's easy for me to say that sitting here, but for an NFL franchise that looks for every little itsy-bitsy advantage, it's a blind spot. But okay, let's go to the ones you have a stronger opinion on. I guess we should probably start with the one that's being dominating conversation last night into today as we're recording this on Wednesday. And that is Russell Wilson's clapback at Sean Payton. And Sean Payton made some comments about Jackson Dart, where he kind of made thinly veiled references to that he was hoping that they would be playing the other quarterback instead of Jackson Dart. And obviously, you know how things ended with Russell Wilson in Denver. Russ tweets out yesterday, classless but not surprised. Didn't realize you're still bounty hunting 15 plus years later through the media. A sunglasses emoji, laughing emoji, let's ride, different laughing. So, Chris, we have not talked about this at all in any of our conversations. So I have no idea where you're going to go with this.
I think this is going to be a unique opinion.
Okay.
I don't like either of these guys, and I hate everything about this story. Like, they're both bad people. Like, they're
both a heel program.
It is a heel program. It is heel on heel crime going on, and I don't care about any of it. Like, it's not like Russ is this morally good person that everybody loves to root for. Like, part of the reason why Denver went as poorly as it did, not just with Sean Payton, is because Russ isn't a good guy. Like, Russ kind of has an ego to him. So it's like, I don't find myself rooting for Russ here. And yeah, Sean Payton's also a bad guy, not rooting for him either.
So, I'm mostly with you on this. There's no really need to pick sides in my mind. Sean
Payton's it's a backup quarterback. Like, be quiet.
Yeah, well, Sean Payton's a jerk, and I think we all know that. And did he take a shot at Russell Wilson there when he didn't need to? Yeah, of course he did. I'm a little surprised Russ clapped back, because that's not something he does, at least publicly. Like, you don't really see him. He kind of just, tweets out like a Bible verse and then a picture of his kids and then moves on with his day. So it was a little interesting to see that, which kind of leads me to believe that things got even worse than we knew between those two when that benching occurred. But at the end of the day, you're right. This is a backup quarterback and a head coach of the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton shouldn't have said it. I don't have an issue with Russell Wilson responding. Did he need to respond? Probably not.
No,
is this a big deal? No.
Yeah, let me make something clear. Russ can defend himself if he wants, but he's just not getting any, I'm not going to, have a bleeding heart and feel bad for him.
No.
I'm just not doing it.
And that's where I'm at. To me, I just think the most interesting part is that he did clap back. Because he's just not somebody that would have. There's some players that that they're going to say something right away. But, yeah. So, it is what it is. To me, at the end of the day, this whole... And I don't know how much you were following this, because I know you were on your honeymoon, but there was this very weird sequence of events leading up to this Broncos-Giants game with clash between Giants fans and Broncos players based off of some tweets that were happening. And this was for two teams that don't play each other very often in the relative scheme of things. It was like a very weird, heated game going in. And then obviously it was a tremendous, tremendous football game. Didn't end the way I was hoping, but it was a tremendous game in general. So there was a lot to this. There was the I mean, I'll admit it, some very questionable calls that went in the Giants' favor in this game, which then eventually led to a conversation between a Broncos defender and a referee that led to a one-game suspension. So there's so many things that have, from basically last Tuesday to now, these last 8 or 9 days has been just a wild sequence of events for two teams that don't have a rivalry.
Yeah, they're not division rivals. They don't play each other every year.
They're not in the conference.
It's very weird.
It was just a very strange week. But
and I could almost to an extent understand it if Russ was still starting for the Giants, right? Then
yes.
then there's a through line that I can follow. Like there was no through line. Like felt very weird that it got that heated and everything in that game that ended up happening in the post aftermath just felt very weird across the board.
Yes. So very strange. And I guess I will end with some more positivity around the Giants. There's a really interesting quote from Adam Schefter that I want to get your thoughts on because, again, it's going to go all the way back to a conversation we had at the very beginning of the season when we did Playoff Predictor. But I'll read you the quote first. It says, quote, "I got to tell you something. They would be a player for the playoff race," Schefter said. "At 2-5, they still might be able to do it." So
I know when we did playoff predictors, we had them playing better in the second half of the season than the first half. We said, hey, you just got to survive the first half of the season and things start to turn for you. And we felt like there was some wins potentially on the calendar, right? And I still overall believe in that. But where I would push back on Schefter's comment is I can't talk about this as a playoff team because they lost to the Saints. Yeah. And they beat the Chargers and the Eagles, so I can say the following two things, and they're both true. The Giants can beat anybody in the sport of football, but the Giants can also lose to anybody in the sport of football, and that to me is not a playoff team. If I can envision after what happened to the Saints, if I can look at a game on your calendar and go, well, they can lose this game, then I'm sorry, I just can't realistically and honestly put you in that playoff category. Totally different story if they beat the Saints, in my opinion, because then you have wins against the Chargers, you take care of business against the Saints, you beat the Eagles, again, losing to the Broncos is what it is, but you're building some positive momentum with Dart. I can get on board, but you lost to the Saints the way that you did. You lost to the Broncos the way that you did. And I'm sorry, because you lost to the Saints, you can lose any single game left on your calendar, and that concerns me.
The other issue, too, is that you're now you're 3 games back of a playoff spot.
Yeah, so, 2-5 also is kind of a problem here as well, yes.
Yeah, I mean, technically right now, the only team with a worse record than you in your conference is the Saints, who
have beaten you, whose one win is against you.
You know, this is, again, it's a completely different conversation. You think about the Dallas game. You know, you think about the Dallas game and the Denver games are 2-1s. Like the Saints game, you think about in the sense of like they should have won that game, but they were beat that day. Like they just were not a good football team that day, and the Saints outplayed them. Dallas was a winnable game that you let slip late. The Broncos was a winnable game that you let slip late. And obviously you're having a completely different conversation right now at 4-3. You know, they're talking about Carolina, or they're talking about the Bears or the Cowboys right now. While their schedule does lighten up late, the problem is they still have some tough games. You're playing at Philly this week. You have the Packers coming up. You have at the Lions.
Patriots.
At New England on a Monday night. You know what I mean? Like these games don't look as easy now as they did before. And you're looking at a conference right now where you have to now jump 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams to get into a playoff spot. There's just a lot of things that it's just going to be very, like the mathematics is going to be very difficult. You're going to have to reel off a run that is, I mean, the reality is at most you can lose 2 more games.
You're right. 10-7, you're thinking 9-8
like
probably doesn't get it done,
is
right?
Probably like your only chance. Like I just don't see it happening.
I mean, yeah.
I appreciate the sentiment, and I think the weird thought that I had about this, and then we'll move on to our final topic. We'll talk about your Islanders here for a second. But
3 in a row, baby.
I had this thought when they ended up losing the game the way they did, because there was this existential just dread as the Broncos were driving down with a few seconds. I'm like, oh, they're just going to give up this field goal. Like, I just felt it. This might, not for Daboll, by the way, but this might be the best case scenario for the long-term Giants fan. In the sense of that game being, you looked really good for large portions of the game. You showed you were good enough to compete on the road against a playoff caliber team, but you still got the loss to help your draft spot.
Well, and especially because you feel like you have the quarterback, right? Like it just
and that's the thing.
Feels like Dart's the guy.
And I think that's the difference to me of like, you're not tanking because you're tanking. The rest of the season is all about how Jackson Dart and company, but mostly Jackson Dart looks. And so, yes, Jackson Dart had a just horrific interception in the fourth quarter, and he had a couple other throws that he got lucky on. But overall, especially with the way you've come out this week and see some of the way the Broncos defenders have talked about Jackson Dart, you got something there. Look the way Vic Fangio talked about him this week as he's prepared. Like, you have something there. So him looking really good and you still being highly competitive in these games is pretty close to the best case scenario for you. Even though, again, you're not tanking for a quarterback, but you have other pieces that you're going to need to add to this team, particularly whether it's a wide receiver. They're going to have some needs on the second and third levels of their defense. We will see how this plays out, but obviously you would have much rather had the win. But in retrospect now, I think you're going to look back and say, we got what we needed to out of that game. And in the long term, even though it hurts to lose it in the short term, it hurts this year. And obviously it hurts Daboll because he has to prove that he's going to be around for the long term, like Jackson Dart's going to be around for the long term. But overall, I think they got, from a 30,000-foot view, they got what they needed to out of that game, even if the end result was not what they were.
The hottest teams in the National Hockey League, my New York Islanders, won 3 in a row after starting 0-3.
And the top pick looks pretty good.
He looks very good. He looks very, very
good. I'm going to read
the
stat to you, Chris, because I saw this last night. Matthew Schaefer became only the second defenseman in NHL history to open his career with a 6-game point streak. And I would not have guessed Marek Zidlicki, former Wild great.
I had to check it. You wrote it in the notes, and I was like, wait a second. Wait a minute.
Yeah. Remember him? I would not have guessed that. And then he's only the second Islander of any position to begin his NHL career with a 6-game point streak. Had his first multi-point game last night. Chris, I know you've missed some of the early games, but you're kind of catching up. But
Yep.
It is always difficult for any top pick, even though we kind of expect top 3 picks in the NHL draft to compete right away. It's really tough as a young defenseman in general, particularly as a young defenseman coming in as a first year after you draft type of a player, to come in and have an impact on the blue line. And we talked about in the preseason what we were kind of hoping from him. So far, so good. It reminds me a little bit of, obviously they're a little bit different stylistically, but remember, reminds me of the Aaron Ekblad when he first came in Florida. A lot of expectations as a number 1 pick to kind of come in and play right away. Was he number 1 or number 2 pick? I don't remember which off the top of my head, but I'm going to look it up.
Gut says number 2, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I said number 1 and then my head said number 2 pick. But either way, there's a lot of expectations coming in at that young of an age to come in and make an impact. No, he was number 1 overall, actually, in the 2014. Number 2 is Sam Reinhart. 3, Leon Draisaitl. So
it's a good draft.
It was. That's an interesting. I'm going to get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, but you're down a rabbit hole. Got to get you back.
We'll bring back. I've been impressed with the way he's been able to not only hold his own in general, but being able to be successful offensively as well. And sometimes that's difficult, where you want to kind of make sure you don't make massive mistakes as a young player just in the lineup for the first time. So the things that really get you excited offensively sometimes get toned down to try to play a little bit of a safer game. He's been able to have a lot of success right away. Islanders have turned things around a little bit. Obviously, there's a firing we're going to talk about with them as well, and maybe what that's going to lead to, although the NHL loves firing their coaches. Even though it's not head coach firing, they just love firing. It's the only league where like they'll just fire play coaches and head coaches, goalie coach stuff mid-season and just keep rolling. More so than any other league, I feel like. But yeah, I mean, I've been impressed with what he's been able to do so far. I'm excited to see how long he can keep this streak going. But to me, it's more important that he's able to get his feet wet early and show the things that made him that top pick early on. So he's able to gain that confidence right away. And also so that the Islanders have confidence to keep him in the lineup and keep giving him the amount of minutes they're going to give him. Not that I thought he was going to be a guy that was not going to stay up for the full season, but you never know. Minutes can get weird, especially with defensemen. Like you can't really hide defensemen. Like you could hide wingers, you could hide forwards in certain formations. put him on the fourth line, shorten your bench, mix up pairings, mix up center wing pairings. You can't really hide defensemen. So if you're not playing well, you're just not going to play. So I'm really encouraged that he's having this much success early.
Especially on the offensive side, because I think it is super easy to come in as a pro and you're trying to learn the NHL speed of the game, and you are going to default to, I'm going to make sure I'm extremely sound defensively. And the counterweight to that is I'm maybe not going to be my maximum potential offensively. So to see him be able to be involved, have this 6-point streak, and not be afraid to be creative and be involved on that end of the ice is a huge confidence booster for this team. And they're starting to see the results turn the corner here, winning 3 in a row, and really excited. Their next test, I don't know if you've looked ahead at their schedule, they get the Red Wings in their next game. Today is the 22nd, right? So tomorrow on Thursday, if you're listening to this on either Wednesday or Thursday. So it'll be really intriguing to see when they start to play some of the top tier competition in the Eastern Conference, how they stack up. It is a jam-packed Metropolitan Division to start the season, and they find themselves right now kind of in that middle ground of the wild card race, and I think that's kind of where they're going to sit for most of the season. They're kind of in a retool, rebuild kind of thing. But if he can hit the ground running and continue to play this way, there's no reason why they can't maybe exceed expectations, and they're already making a change because they need better goaltending from Ilya Sorokin, and they've made a change with their goaltender coach. And Jamie, I'd love your thoughts on this. You covered the NHL way more on a day-to-day and a season-by-season basis than I did. So I would love your thoughts on this.
Before you continue with that, I just happened to look at Matthew Schaefer leads the Islanders defensemen in shot attempt percentage. So Corsi and Fenwick. That's really exciting to see for a young guy, and a young guy that's kind of splitting. I mean, his zone starts have been pretty evenly split between neutral main and defensive zone, and that's really encouraging. That when he is on the ice, that the puck is going in the right direction. I know that seems intuitive, but it is something that young defensemen really struggle with. Even young defensemen that are good offensively sometimes really struggle with, like, they get hemmed in their own zone, hemmed in their own zone, hemmed in their own zone. And very early on here, not only is he not being put in those situations, but he's able to get the puck moving and puck out of the zone, and also hasn't been all offensive zone. Because sometimes you'll see that with certain young forwards or young defensemen of that they will be put in a lot of times where they will start the majority of their not on the fly rotation spots will be offensive zone faceoffs, because it gives them a better chance to not only show their offensive skills, but to have some more room for defensive structure versus starting in the defensive zone. They've pretty much kept him fairly neutral, especially for a young guy in that spot. So overall, very encouraging. But back to the goaltending conversation.
Well, the question I was going to ask you, because you were closer to this than I was. I'm just a hockey fan. You were somebody that was a hockey journalist. The big difference between the two. On the surface, I don't have any problem with what they did here, right? They bring in a goaltending coach from their AHL team that has a previous relationship with Sorokin. They need to get him back on track. Nothing works this year and in the future unless Sorokin is playing at his A game. I'm just very confused at the idea of this coach that they called up, that they have replaced their goaltending coach with, was in Bridgeport in May of 2024. And they're doing this 6 games into the season. You could have just done this in the summertime. Like this isn't somebody that you got off of the street that just became available someplace else, and I could maybe wrap my head around it. This is somebody that you had in the organization. So it does feel like the timing, while I think I like the move, the timing feels really weird because you could have just made this move in the summertime.
Yeah, it feels like something happened. And when I say something happened, I don't necessarily mean anything nefarious. This feels like he's been with the organization for a while. I believe he's been with the organization
7 seasons. 7 years.
Since 2018, if I remember correctly. Look, it is not uncommon at all for goaltenders to have not only sometimes the team goaltending coach, but their own personal goaltending coach in the room as well. That happened with the Arizona Coyotes a few different times when I was there. Sometimes, by the way, that creates some contention in the organization where they feel like we want you working with our guy, not your guy, type of a thing. Obviously, this is a case where somebody that was already in the organization that they brought over that has worked with Sorokin before. This screams to me that either there was some sort of falling out with Greco, or not, it's not Greco. Is it Greco? Was that the
no?
Or is, yeah, it is Greco. Sorry. So many names of floating around. Yeah, either it was falling out with Greco, or it was a scenario where the goaltender himself said, like, "I don't feel right. Give me my guy." And I think that's probably what's more likely to happen. Because otherwise you just do this at the beginning of the season. Like you don't make this move 6 games in. Like if it was this close to you, this is probably one of those scenarios where Sorokin said, give me my guy. And the
organization. Well, the timing of it's so weird too, right? Because they win 3 in a row and then they make this move, right?
Yes.
They're starting to play better as a team, and this is when they decide to pull the trigger and make this move.
This screams, I need my guy. More than anything else. And whether that's fair or unfair, it's life. And like I said, goaltending is it's very strange. Goaltenders are very strange. And you don't see, like, you see around the league. I remember, like, everyone freaked out when, like, Tom Brady had, like, his personal trainers or whatever on the sidelines, and Belichick hated. Goaltending is one of the weird ones where, like, a lot of times their own guys are in the building, even if the teams hate it with a fiery passion, which more than often than not, they do. This is different. They hired this guy. But goaltenders want to work with their own guys. They're very much mentally prone to positive and negative streaks. Very much creatures of habit, a little bit like baseball pitchers, starting pitchers in a way. But yeah, so that to me screams that Sorokin just said he wanted his own guy. So it makes sense to me. Did Greco get a raw deal? Maybe. Again, we'll see where he lands in the organizational hierarchy, or if he gets a nice fat check on his way out. But this is not something I think is crazy news, but it is interesting only because of the timing and the fact that this guy's been in your organization for a long time now, that you didn't make this move sooner, which kind of just makes me think the goaltender finally just said, hey, no, I need my guy. Just whatever. I just need my guy.
You do this 25 games into the season, 40 games into the season, 60 games into the season. I don't think anybody bats an eye at it, but to do it 6 games into the season, it feels like, really, is this a big enough sample size for you to determine that this is not the right voice in the room? And so, to your point, it feels like something happened that led to them deciding that this was the right course of action. Good to be back. And appreciate everybody bearing with us there in our absence. We're back on Friday. We'll get you ready for the football weekend. We'll preview the Jets. We'll preview the Giants. We'll get you ready for all of the action. Maybe we'll sneak in some baseball talk. Both teams are out. They're kind of sitting on the sidelines. The World Series starts on Friday, but their off-season's probably already getting in gear. The Mets making some coaching moves already. I'm sure the Yankees starting to put their pieces together.
Doing a whole lot of nothing.
For what should be a fun off-season for
back.
both teams as they try to improve their rosters to get back to the promised land, get back to a World Series. If you want to watch the program, you can do so either via Spotify or on the NY Sports Index YouTube channel. If you're listening to us over in the podcast feed, do us a favor, rate, review, subscribe. Do us an even bigger favor, share the show with a friend and a fellow New York sports fan. We would greatly appreciate that. We are back again on Friday. Get you ready for the football weekend. We'll talk to you then.